want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
We are the Madmen of Masculinity.
Your home for healthy masculinity. We're just real men having real conversations for you.
Good day, Madmen Mafia.
I am Kirk M. Samuels.
And I am Jason B. Kendrick.
And we are the Madmen of Masculinity.
That's right. We're just real men having real conversations for you. So what are we talking about today, man?
I don't know, but I got on my Big Worms ice cream truck shirt on today, man. You know what I'm
Big
saying?
perm, big worm.
Big Worm. Yeah, you know. Playing with my money is like playing with my emotions.
Don't do it. Don't be
You know
messing
what I'm
around
saying?
like that.
Hey, you ever been under pressure in your life?
Like a diamond, baby. That's why I glow so bad, you know.
Oh, see.
Is that not what I'm supposed to say?
Nah, well, I mean, you know, it is what it is. I ain't here to tell you what to say, what not to say, but you know, some people say that pressure bust pipes or make diamonds.
Right.
I don't know which one is which sometimes in life, man. Sometimes it feels like is making me, you know, sometimes it feels like it's making me better. Sometimes it feels like it's making me bitter, man. Different phases in life, but I think men across the board face pressure, man. We kind of wake up with that thing, and how we deal with that pressure is probably just how we deal with life.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this when you brought it up. I'm like, I think every man deals with pressure in a different way, and depending on the type of pressure, where it's coming from, and where he's at that day in his mood, whatever, depends on how he handles it. But to your point, I think how a man handles his pressure will determine how successful he is in all areas of life, because pressure is one of those things, whether it's stress or, just expectations, responsibility, all those things can lead up to pressure. So it's like, is it pressure? Is it motivation? Is it, just the weight of the world on your shoulders? Like how do you define it, and how do you use it, or how does it use you? I guess is probably the best question.
Yeah, man, because we as men, a lot of the things that we carry in life. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, men are more likely to be addicted to something. Men are more likely to end their lives. Men are more likely to be incarcerated. There's a lot of fatal pitfalls and potholes in life that men seem to be more susceptible to. And so, when it comes down to it, the reason that men are more susceptible to those things is because we have an inherent pressure, just put on us, just based on life, based on society and the roles that we play in society, whether it's, riding on the back of the fire truck, or, being on the front lines, or, they right now, I saw a news article like, could there be another draft, and, with pending war and all that stuff, and males at 18 are required to sign up for the draft. Females are not. So we are indoctrinated into manhood legally with, you need to volunteer, quote unquote, to put yourself on you need to sign up to be put on the front lines if we need, if we need a body to serve our country. So, these are just the kind of things that we carry as men.
Yeah, I think it comes down a lot to our experiences growing up, how we were raised, the things we had to deal with. Because I see a lot of folks, especially a lot of guys nowadays, depending on how they grew up and how they raised, they either have the experience of dealing with pressure or they don't. And so sometimes that depends on how they grew up. Sometimes they had parents, or they just had experiences where the responsibilities of life were put on them at an early age, and they learned how to deal with it, and they're really good at handling the pressure. There's those, we see a lot of them now, especially these younger guys, haven't had any pressure, haven't had any challenges, haven't had any responsibilities put on them, and then they get out in the world to be quote unquote adult, and they just fold like origami. They don't have any idea how to handle the pressure. They have no idea how to handle responsibilities, and then they turn into little girls. They just whine and Karen and go off when things don't go their way because they've never had an experience of challenges. They've never had to experience true responsibility. They've never really had an opportunity to learn how to handle pressure. And so when that pressure gets put on them, they just fold. And so sometimes I believe it's, your upbringing. Sometimes it could just be your natural personality, how you handle it. But I think for most of us guys, it really comes down to a matter of experience. Because as we get into our later years, like you and I, we're getting up there a little bit, middle age, as it were, and we've had enough experience that these little things don't bother us. There's been enough going on, enough responsibility, enough pressure, enough drama, enough all that stuff. So we're just kind of like, meh, is the house on fire? Are you dead? Okay, we'll figure it out. We're good. So I think sometimes it just comes down to what's the guy's experience with it.
And as you get into the older years, pressure is just kind of a given when you wake up in the morning. And that's probably why we value peace so much in terms of, when you get older guy, man, he don't like a whole lot of nonsense, man. He don't like he don't like all that. And so, that's why we value peace. That's why we thrive at least in a home setting. We look for that. We value that pretty high on the scale. And but you brought up when we're young. You brought up being a young male and whether or not young males today are, I'm going to say, introduced or indoctrinated or familiarized with the whole idea of pressure. Maybe back in the day, sports did that. A lot of young males would play sports, and if you think about it, man, it's a lot of pressure to you know to come through for your team or come through for your individual self or whatever in a non life threatening but sports based environment. And so whether it's that or whether it's a father taking a son out to hunt, teach him how to hunt or teach him how to fish or whatever, and to some degree, if there's a lot of men not in the home, a lot of men not in their sons' lives primarily, or, are around in a lot of time, then a lot of those things don't get transferred down and we end up bubble wrapping our little young men to the point where we want to protect them from, hurt, harm, and danger, and that translates to we want to protect them from stress and we want to protect them from pressure of life and all those kinds of things. And guess what, as soon as life gets tough in middle school or high school, all of a sudden, the world is the enemy, and to your point, they either fold, or they fire and snap. And we didn't have kids snapping, young teenagers, the way we, decades ago, the way we do now. And maybe that comes down to the fact that we don't expose them to pressure. Maybe we don't expose them to what that is like in terms of the masculine journey at an early age. And I'm not talking about just like punishing kids or you know just brutalizing kids for the fun of it, but at the same time, there's some level of preparation that a young man being around an older man, it just happens when you get those two together in the same space and in the same life journey.
Yeah, I mean, not to go against single moms. Once again, I know you guys doing the best you can, but there are certain things that a man has to teach a boy. There are certain things that masculinity has to teach masculinity. And when we have majority of young men nowadays being raised by single moms or in a household where they don't see their dad or they don't have the healthy masculine role model or any kind of masculine role model, they don't get the challenges because we both have different jobs. The lady's job is the nurturing, the caretaker. They're very, if babies don't have their mother around them from like birth until 7 years old, most of them don't survive. But after seven, once that child hits puberty, most men, most of the father's job is to prepare them for the world, which means challenges, responsibility, making sure they understand how to deal with failure, and that the world's not when you're a child, you're egocentric, so you think the world revolves around you, and it's really a father's job to be like, well, no, you live in your own little world, but the world does not revolve around you. You got to take responsibility for your world and got to understand that other people don't care about you. Like, I'm your dad and like, that's your mom and we love you and we care about you, but the rest of the world don't. So you need to prepare for that. and get out in the world and be responsible and understand that there's gonna be pressures and stresses and things like that. And when we don't have that influence, you get out into the world and you might just crumble. Some guys thrive. Some, I've seen some of them that come from single mother households and, they took on that role young, probably because their mom worked. So they took on responsibility. So that's why they got that responsible gene. They got that habit of being responsible and doing the right thing. And so when they got out in the world, that was nothing for them. They're like, I've been doing this since I was 5 years old. But then a lot of boys don't get that. They get the bubble wrap, oh, protect our babies. Don't let them have, a hard life, or don't let them experience bad things or have failure. But when they don't have that experience in childhood, they can't handle it when they get to adulthood.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of young men spend their whole youth indoors, on a screen, and not out experiencing life, not out getting cut and scratched and scraped, and coming home with gashes and blood dripping out of places and needing stitches and all that kind of stuff. And
Just put some
that
dirt
was
in
just
it,
part of
spit on it.
childhood. They don't. And we'll as we get into this conversation here today, we'll get into adulthood and men and how we do and how we should. But
Yeah.
talking about childhood, man, these young kids, they don't know what it's like to drink out of a garden hose. I mean, you leave us outside all day long, we gonna find something to drink because there's a spigot somewhere.
Mhm.
We gonna put our mouth on a spigot. I mean, and just being able to survive, man, just being able to thrive and in those types of situations. Young kids don't get that these days. Young men don't get the rejection of girls. They don't do the know how to spit game. They don't know how to I like you. Do you like me? No. Okay, I move on and all that kind of stuff. And so they are, afraid of rejection and that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of these experiences, man, that prepare us for life that we actually get at a younger age. And yeah, to your point, when a young kid doesn't get to experience those things for whatever reason, man, it's not a good setup for adulthood because the real world doesn't care. The real world just doesn't care about a whole lot of things. When you get, women don't care about hurting your feelings by saying no. So you better
Mm.
learn how to, you better learn how to get rejected when you ask for that phone number. I mean, all these kinds of different things that exist in adulthood that should exist in childhood that I don't know that they necessarily do these days.
Yeah, I mean, with the kids spending most of their time online, and then there's no repercussions to their actions online. They can be, digital bullies. They can be all kind of trolls and all these different things, and there's no repercussions because they're on a screen and somebody else is across the world or a state away or something. So they don't have that face to face repercussions that, especially for young boys, they need to have. They need to know that there's, your mouth has consequences. You can't just say what you want to say to everybody. And then you get out in the world and think you can just say what you want to say to everybody and then get surprised when you get hit in the face. So you need to have that experience young to understand that's how the world works. Speaking of how the world works, it's time for us to take our first break. We are the Mad Men of Masculinity. You are listening to KLDC, and we'll be right back. You like
You're
that
right,
segue?
boys.
I just,
Better. I dig that, man. I dig that. Boys better know, man. You
Mhm.
talk that talk. You better be able to walk that walk. You know,
Yeah.
is what it
I
is.
see, I see, I see some of these just ignorant and just dumb TikTok influencers or these social media influencers, and they'll be going up to UFC fighters, like
Oh yeah.
people who are trained to kill you. This is what they do for a living, and be talking
Hmm.
mess, talking smack, and then get surprised when that dude's like, "I'm gonna break you in half."
Hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was
Yeah.
just a prank. It's just a prank. Don't prank a
Yeah.
man. That dude's gonna
Nah,
whoop you up.
you got that right. And especially in places like Colorado where everybody's got
Mhm.
a concealed carry. Yeah, I mean, you don't, man, you don't play certain games, man. You don't play certain things out in the streets, and so you better learn that thing young, man. There's no reset button on the video game of life. You mess up and that's it.
That's part of that situational awareness and learning how to deal with pressure give you. You're like, okay, I live in a state
Hmm.
that's concealed carry. There are mountains and deserts and a lot of places with wild animals that want a free meal. and I could be disappeared, and nobody would ever find me. So you
Yeah.
better watch your
Yeah.
mouth. You never
Yeah.
know. You
That's the
ready?
reality of it, man. Yep. We're back.
And we're back.
We're
Let's do that
back.
thing. Round two. Ding, ding,
Mad Men and
ding.
Masculinity, KLDC, 1220 AM in the Mile High City, on the interwebs, everywhere.
Everywhere. Yes,
YouTube,
sir.
Facebook, madmenradio.com, all the podcast platforms, you name it. We out there trying to do our thing. B Men Summit coming up. If you're in the Colorado area, stop by. I mean, this can be a fantastic day. Great speakers, bmen.com/summit. Man, this can be phenomenal. August 23rd, 2025.
Is that a backslash or a forward slash? How do you tell? It's
Or
the top or
whatever,
the
man.
bottom?
Listen, slash. You can slash it whatever way you just slash it. If it don't work, use the other slash. I don't know.
There you go.
One of them bad
Well,
boys,
you
man.
can always go to bmn.org and you'll see Summit at the top. You can click on that as well. But yeah, we got tickets for sale. Make sure you get your
Mhm.
tickets because it's a full day event. You're going to be inspired. You're going to have your eyes open, your brain open, your heart open. You're going to meet amazing other men. You might find your own crew. And you know what?
Yeah,
There's only so much space. The Parker
yeah,
Schoolhouse ain't that big. So make sure you
yeah.
get your tickets and tell your boys that you want to come because we're going to sell out.
And I wanna circle back to that eventually in terms of dealing with stress and being surrounded by other guys, because I think that's important. But when you don't have the foundation for being able to deal with pressure, being able to deal with stress, being able to deal with the complexities of life. When you don't have that as a young man, you are not as prepared as an older man. And when you get into your teen years, not that being a teen is an older man, but an older male anyway. When you get into your teen years, then you start to have to develop people skills and social skills, and that's where you realize that that pressure of being who you are, that pressure of being a male, that pressure of being a eventual man begins to mount up. I think about my when my son was in middle school, all of a sudden the kids um, started calling him stuff that he had never heard before. And so me and him had to sit down and have some of those conversations, man. And the way I put it to him, when the social pressure gets to you in that kind of way, teaching them how to push back, how to defend himself, where to draw the line, all those kinds of things. But when you get into middle school, I'm going to call it middle school, and into high school is where a male begins to realize that there's pressure of being a male that is not talked about, but it just is. It's a social thing that exists in our culture.
Yeah, I mean that's the prime time. That's when puberty hits, those hormones kick in, and they start sprouting. They start sprouting hair everywhere. They don't know what's going on, and then they just naturally get into that hierarchy thing of competing, of who's the alpha, who's the beta, who's the top dog, who's that. And so that's part of that lesson every child needs to learn. Every little boy needs to learn this lesson so they understand. And we naturally do as men, we just have that natural masculine kind of mindset of, okay, there's a hierarchy, who's the best at this, who's the best at that. And that's why we do better at survival because we're like, all right, Kirk's better at this, Jason's better at that, so and so's better at this. Let them do that. They take charge of that. Now we know who's doing
Mhm.
what, and let's move it forward. But without those challenges, and to your point, if you don't have those challenges, you don't learn to have you don't learn how to respond. You don't have those wisecracks or those jokes to snap back. You don't have a way of knowing how to squash it and walk away. You don't have these ideas or these methods or these tools in your toolkit. And so if you've been bubble wrapped your whole life, and every time somebody says something sideways to you and you don't know how to react to it, and then somebody comes along, your mom or whoever, the teacher, oh, we have an anti-bullying policy. Bullying is not good, but it does prepare you for life. Because once you get out of school and you don't have parents and teachers and these people hovering over you, bullying is still going to happen. But if you don't have any experience of how to deal with that pressure, how to squash it, how to turn it around, how not to even like respond to it, just be like, okay, those are the things you learn by going through this. So if you have a hard time with pressure, and that's one of the things I wanted to bring up as well, if you're having a hard time with pressure or stress, look at how you deal with it, because 9 times out of 10, most of us will respond in the same fight or flight mechanism that we learned in childhood or didn't get experience of how to, respond correctly. So it's either fight, flight, flee, or freeze or fawn. So it's like you're either going to fight, you're going to run away, you're going to freeze up, or you're going to be like, all of a sudden you're going to turn into the yes man. Oh, you're the best, and now you're some guy's lackey because he wanted to bully you. These are things we have to learn as men to show us like what is in my wheelhouse, what is my unconscious programming, these things when you're under pressure will tell you and show you in no uncertain terms what's running you underneath subconsciously, because you'll react. You don't have time to think. You're going to react to this pressure, and that's going to show you who you are. And that's why men who have dealt with pressure and have experience with pressure handle it so much better than those who haven't.
Yeah. Bullying is never going to go away. There are grown up bullies. There are, at some point you may have a boss that's a bully. At some point in your life as a man, you may have a woman in your life that's a bully. And
She might be
so,
living in your house.
she might be. You might have put a ring on her finger. I mean, for all I
Mhm.
know, but bullies are going to exist, man, and so you better learn how to deal with those kind of things. That's a form of pressure that's put on you, because those bullies. The whole point of them is, they like to impose their will on other people, and it's going to make you do what they want you to do. But there's going to be bullies for the rest of your life, and you got to learn how to deal with that, along with every other type of pressure in life, man. And when young men get their baseline, their template for how to deal with pressure from an older man, an older role model in their life, ideally a father or father figure, is where they're going to get that template, where they're going to get the tools and how to deal with pressure. What does it look like when pressure comes? How do I handle that? And in a lot of cases, we pick that up from somebody else, whether it's somebody on TV, somebody we idolize. A lot of us, might have idolized a star quarterback growing up, or a NBA player or something like that. Like, man, I want to be like that. You used to have a movie poster on your wall. I remember I used to have a Top Gun movie poster on my wall, or whatever it is. And so we learn that template. We learn those tools from other older men. Ideally, a young man learns how to treat women by the role model that he saw in his life, the closest male role model that he saw. That if ideally it was a good situation and he saw that you don't haul off and smack her up against the refrigerator. That's not a way to function. Ideally, he gets that. When he doesn't get that, and when he has to figure it out, and that's when you develop what we like to consider the toxic aspect of a personality. The problem is most of us were not raised with a primary male figure in our life. So most of us get into adulthood as men and we don't have a template. We don't have the tool kit. We may be wearing a tool belt, but we're walking around with no tools or very limited tools in that tool belt. It's like ordering a toolkit off of Amazon, the starter toolkit kind of thing or whatever. And it's like, no, you didn't get issued that growing up because you didn't see that whole thing. So when we get into the adolescent years is when we start to realize the tools that we did or didn't get, and the template that we have or had or didn't have. And that's where we begin to formulate, what kind of a man am I going to be in terms of the pressure that exists in my life.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up, because in my experience and a lot of others' experiences, we weren't necessarily given the tools in childhood to prepare us, because we
Mhm.
had overbearing parents, or it was like my way or the highway. So especially as the older generation, as the parents or the guides, the guardians, we've got to prep these kids and give them the tools and allow them to be able to push back, allow them to ask questions, allow them to be able to do the things that they need to do in adulthood. But so many times, I know in my experience, it was don't question me, don't talk back, you shut up and go sit over there, do what I told you to. And so there wasn't skill set or a lesson about, this is how you, rebut. This is how you have a debate. This is how you argue. This is how you ask questions. This is how I remember getting in trouble with the cops at a young age. My dad's like, "Oh, you didn't tell me anything, did you?" And I'm like, "Well, all my life you told me if I got in trouble, I should just fess up. It'll make it so much better." He's like, "Well, no, with the cops, like that might have been something you might want to highlight. That might have been something you might want to have told me prior to me going out into the world." And so we as parents, we as the elder generation, as men, need to teach these kids the the skills they need to handle the pressure, the tools they need to be able to get out in the world and do these things. Because we just keep seeing more and more with the newer generations, younger generations, they don't have the toolkits, they don't have the experience, and they just assume things will go like they did in school. With they've got all the helicopter parents and teachers and this whole school board and all these people keeping everybody like, oh, don't traumatize each other, don't talk bad to each other, don't do. Then they get out in the world, and that's exactly what they experience. They have no experience, no way of dealing with that because they don't have the tool sets, toolkit, or the experience to deal with it. And so that's what we need to think about. You don't want your kids to just be yes men to you because then they'll be yes men out in the world. You don't want them to be beta to you just because end up being beta out in the world. You need to teach them how to step up and give them those skills that you've probably learned over years the hard way. Teach them how to have those skills before they go out in the world. Then you're actually teaching them how to survive in the world.
As I right now, I'm really kind of feeling inspired, and we got to set this up. We got to have a conversation. I'm thinking about our guy Torrance that works in mentoring and in the trades, and a lot of what they do at his organization is not even just about introducing young people, and I think it's primarily young men into the trade industry, but a lot of it has to do with just mentoring and helping them transition from youth to adult. Because if we don't have that, like I said, if you don't have it, then it's a lot harder to get it on your own than to have somebody model it for you. And so when we get into, as we maybe transition here coming up, as we transition into how we deal with pressure and then how we should deal with pressure, I think the underlying baseline to all of this is, man, it'd be really great if you didn't have to, if it wasn't taught, if it was caught. In other words, if it was something that you picked up along your journey of life as to this is how I deal with this as a man.
Yeah, and once we get into this third segment, we're going to really get into how men tend to deal with it. And then as we get deeper, how we should deal with it, because a lot of us need some refreshers as adult men. So let's refresh ourselves a break. We are the Mad Men of Masculinity. You're listening to us on KLDC, and we'll be right back.
I'm sitting here thinking, man, I mean, that's a great conversation to have, just mentoring and setting the
Yeah.
path and all
Well,
that
I mean, you
stuff,
think
man.
about
'Cause,
all the tangibles that you don't think about that young men need. How to shake hands, how to look a man in the eye, how to do an interview. And you get all these kids going into trying to get a job and they don't have any of those skills, none of those tools, and then they can't get a job anywhere because any old man that's been in the construction industry for any amount of time, and you got some new trade kid coming in, and he's just like
mhm.
on his phone and he won't shake your hand, he won't look up. He ain't getting a chance. I can't
Yeah.
deal with this kid.
Yeah. I mean, I remember vividly having the specific instances of showing my son how to shake a hand and how to make eye contact when you shake a hand and all that kind of stuff. And buying him his first suit and like, hey, every guy needs a suit kind of, I mean, but those kind of things, man, like I said, you just ain't gonna, that kind of stuff, you're not just gonna know that. Like that
Yeah.
kind of stuff has to be passed down, man.
Yeah, you're
And
not gonna pick that up unless you're just like looking to
no,
find that from some other guy.
no. So yeah, we got to have that conversation at some point
Yeah.
with him. I just talked to him earlier today, man. We need to. I'm like, man, we need to set that up soon,
All right, we'll bring him back in. We need to
real
have another
soon.
studio session anyway. We'll bring him
Yeah,
back in. We'll chop it up. All right, here we go.
going up.
And
Your
we're back.
boys are
Are
back,
back.
man. I'm telling you. This is Madman of Masculinity, KLDC 1220 AM in the Mile High City. We always live stream the recording, or either we record the live stream. Uh,
Are we
in any
recording the
case,
broadcast or broadcasting the recording?
yeah, I
I
don't
don't know
know.
which.
That's a great question, man. It's one or the other, chicken or the egg, whatever. But either way, if you're listening to us over the air, you can always check us out and see what we look like, what we're wearing when we were recording this.
Check out these
Documented
faces for
forever
radio. Hmm.
on YouTube, and check out our Facebook page, all that kind of stuff, man. I love the shorts and the reels that you put out throughout the week, and it's so funny when I'm scrolling, all of a sudden my face will
There's your
pop up
face.
or your face will pop up. I'm like, whoa, all right, that escalated quickly. So it's pretty cool, if you want to see what your boys look like and the way we get down, facial expressions. Because sometimes one of us will be saying something, the other one will be making a weird facial expression.
That's just how I look,
But it
man.
is what it is. It's just it is what it is. So today we're talking about pressure, man, and pressure either making diamonds or busting pipes, man. And pressure can stop bleeding. Um, but
Or get started
too
too.
much pressure, too much pressure can start bleeding. It just
Yep.
is what it is. And us as men, unfortunately, a lot of times we deal with pressure in very unhealthy ways. When we don't have solid foundations in life, we as men deal with pressure in ways that quite honestly can be destructive, can be counterproductive, can be isolating, all these other kind of things, man. A lot of those ways that we deal with pressure can involve, drinking something, smoking something, watching something, just escape in some kind of way. And I think one of the most common ways that we as men deal with pressure is to try to escape it on a daily basis.
Yeah, most of my formative years, 20s, probably 30s too. I was the escape artist. We got too hard, got too pressure filled, too much responsibility, or too much expectation was really a big one. Like too much unspoken expectation can feel like the weight of the world on your shoulders because you don't know how you're failing because nobody told you what they expected. And so it's like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm out. And so that's part of that fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. It's the reactions to stress, to experiences that we as men need to understand because a lot of us are failing when it comes to pressure. And I think the biggest reason is because most of us don't have experience, especially with whatever the particular kind of pressure is, that we take it very personally because we're men. We're supposed to know it all, we're supposed to do it all. We're never supposed to ask for help. We're supposed to be the warriors on the battlefield. We're supposed to have this, wear the Superman cape and have it all together. But we're still human beings and we're still learning and we're still growing and we're still on this path of life. And so maybe we didn't get that skill set. But I know in my experience and for a lot of guys I know, their experience when something didn't go right, when they felt failure and they felt the pressure and the stress from that, they folded because they didn't have the toolkit. They didn't have they're like, oh, well, I failed. So now I'm a failure. So I might as well just give up. They didn't have the experience of falling on your face, failing forward, trying again. Everything that we learn and everything that gives us the strength that we need starts out as failure. I mean, you look at how just backwards and kind of oxymoronical life is. When you go to the gym, you feel weak to get stronger. When you learn something new, you feel dumb to get smarter. All these different things, you get the kind of the opposite, which gives you, what is the thing when you rub two smooth things together and make them rough? You rub two rough things together and make them smooth. It's the same sort of thing when we as men need to have these experiences. And if we're not getting them, we need to go out consciously and look for mentors. Because like we were talking about our friend Torrance, and he works with the Master's Apprentice Academy. They literally teach young men how to shake hands, look a man in the eye, do an interview properly, because these are skills that most young men aren't getting. And then they fold under the pressure because they just feel like failures. We have to first teach kids that failure is not a bad thing. Doesn't say anything bad about you. You're just learning something new. It's just a skill set you're going to get because I don't care who you are. First time you did something, you sucked at it. And then you got better because you kept trying. We just have to teach as men how to keep trying and gain these skills so they can handle the pressures of life.
Yeah, stress and pressure. Well, pressure equates to stress. In our bodies, physiologically, stress and pressure show up as cortisol. And if you ever want to see a world representation of what's going on in our bodies, look up the effects of cortisol on the human body, and
Mm.
you'll see that in America, in the Western culture, we basically live in a cortisol induced um, state of being all day, every day. That's just kind of how we live our lives. And again, if you look at the effects of cortisol, high levels of cortisol, cortisol is a good thing. It's a good thing for our body. To your point, the fight or flight kind of thing. It serves a purpose. But when we live in sustained levels of cortisol, and you couple that with sedentary lifestyles and consumeristic eating and consumption and drinking and all that kind of stuff, it's just not a good recipe. And so, unfortunately, you know, when men have high levels of cortisol, more often than not, our culture offers very cheap, inexpensive ways to deal with cortisol. And when I say that, I'm talking about just different things to consume, different things to consume to allow us to escape. Man, for a guy to go out and get drunk every day and every night, I mean, that's a way to deal with cortisol. To consume something that is another chemical that takes you away from or reduces the level of cortisol in our culture. I mean, that's what that looks like. And so unfortunately, a lot of men really get caught up in some literally toxic ways to deal with that. The need to drink your way out of every day. That's because we live in cortisol induced societies, and just it's just the way that plays out. And so, like I said, unfortunately, that's why we see higher addiction rates amongst men. I mean, that's why there's no term lone gun woman. I mean, it's a lone gunman. I mean, because men snap and they don't know how to do it. I'm not justifying these things. I'm just saying this is how you see it manifesting in our culture. That men act out in certain ways. We um, consume pornography at astronomical rates because it is a phenomenal, very free way to get away from the cortisol that you have in your life. I mean, because the perfect antidote to cortisol in terms of effects on the human body are oxytocin. And so, a lot of guys chase love and they chase emotional connection because that oxytocin level is a great antidote. Um, it's a great thing to experience when you're experiencing high levels of cortisol. And so and again, I'm not justifying any of those things. I'm just talking about the way it is because, relatively speaking, you know, beer and booze and breasts are really cheap in our culture. I mean, it just is what it is. And so we find a lot of unhealthy ways to get away from what I believe is a highly cortisol induced level of just living in our Western culture.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because I don't even know if it started in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, but I know in the 80s it was full swing. But there was this movement to glorify stress, this movement to glorify overachievement, this movement to glorify like living in that heightened cortisol state all the time, to the point where it got to like new sales guys would be like, I stayed up all night. I only got 3 hours of sleep. I was grinding it out. And this whole work harder, grind it out kind of mentality is living in stress. And then you add on top of that the news, which is a stress factory. All it's trying to do is stress you out, put you in fear. Um, all of the bills and all of the requirements to be a real man that we deal with nowadays of making six figures plus and having to climb the corporate ladder and having to do all those things to be thought of or be labeled as valuable. And these are all external things, and all those external pressures turn into stress, turns into things that ends up taking us out and killing us because we've lost the ability to be present and be foundational in our own manhood and our own presence because we keep looking externally. And anytime you're looking externally, you're going to fail to find what you're looking for because everything is generated internally. And that's what we lose as men when we don't have that masculine example, either through childhood from a father or, an elder man that's there to raise us or to teach us, or from a group around us that's striving to be the best version of themselves they can be. And a lot of times what we miss out on as men, especially when it comes to dealing with pressure and stress, is not having a strong foundation. And we tend to look at things like the numbers on the balance sheet or what my boss wants or what my lady wants, all these external factors, and we take those on, and it causes more stress, more cortisol, causes that pressure, and ends up breaking us. And because we've lost a structural foundational beingness of being present as a man, because I think one of the reasons that as we get older and we get more experienced and wiser as men, we don't care about all this stuff and we want peace, is because we finally get to a point where we realize what really matters. All these stresses and all the stuff, the fast cars and the bigger paycheck and that hotter girl and all these different things, they don't really matter in the long run. And so we teach ourselves through trial and error, through falling on our faces and through going through the stress, going through the grinder, dealing with the pressure, to focus and be more focused and pragmatic about what do we allow to pressure us? What do we allow to stress us? What do we allow in our lives? And we get more focused on this is what's important to me. This is my foundation. This is my purpose. This is my path in life. And that helps me to deal with the pressures of life. Because if it's not taking me towards what I want, I'm not going to deal with it. If it's not taking me towards my goal, it's a no. If it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And so these are things we as men need to focus on when it comes to how we should handle stress and pressure in the world.
And if you think about, and I'd love to, in a few minutes when we get back from the, I would love to kind of finish up our last lap with how men should deal with pressure.
Yes.
But if you think about cortisol, if you think about fight or flight, survival, all those kinds of things, you get tunnel vision. Um, and when men are feeling pressure, when men are feeling overly stressed, we have a tendency to shut down relationally. We have a
Mhm.
tendency to go inside, to not reach out, to not talk about things, to not, connect with other people. We have a tendency to go within to deal with that, pressure, to deal with the stress of life, and the high cortisol levels, if you will. And again, very detrimental, very counterintuitive in terms of having the awareness to in the EQ, the emotional intelligence to not do that, because also again a great way to relieve stress is to connect with others and to experience that level of some level of bonding with somebody. But again, we go inside as men. We have a tendency to shut down and shut out other people, and just shut out the world and just deal with it. We don't go to the doctor when we feel in pain here, pain there. We don't go to therapists when we really struggling the way we should. We don't seek a spiritual connection when we are spiritually shut down. We literally just close up shop and we deal with it. And guess what? Life is gonna, family. If you're married, you're gonna feel pressure. You're gonna have times of life. If you're single, you're gonna feel pressure. I mean, as men, I guess is part of it, and we got to know that we're not broken because we feel that. But we got to make sure we do what can sometimes be counterintuitive, um, in terms of how we respond to those times in life.
Well, it's time for us to take that counterintuitive break. So I know
Mhm.
we're on the roll, but we'll be right back. Talk about how we should handle pressure. This is the Mad Men Masculinity right here on KLDC, and we'll see you right back.
I wonder why we do that, man. I wonder why we shut down like that. I mean, that's just for I don't know. Maybe it's biologically just the way we're wired.
I
I
think
don't
it's
know,
I
man.
think it's a layer cake of like what we're taught, how we're wired, and what we expect of ourselves or what others expect of us that we take internally. Like, we taught all our lives, big boys don't cry and suck it up, and then we as men tend to want to figure things out. So we'll shut down and go internal to figure out what is it I'm feeling, how can I express this, and then ladies they vent and that's how they express their and deal with their stress and their pressure. But we tend to go the opposite. So yeah, I think we just get trained that way, and then we don't know how to release the pressure.
Yeah, we also don't want to be a burden to other people too, and
That's
we
big.
also, we also don't want to lay our stuff on other people. To your point, women open up and they lay stuff on other people when they're dealing with it. Men, we don't want to. I don't want to put my junk in your trunk, because
We're,
you
we're
probably got enough.
Yeah, we're supposed to be the rock. We're supposed to be the
Mhm.
foundation here. We're supposed to hold everything up. So if we're like, hey, I'm struggling, it needs to be done. But yeah, every one of us like
Yeah,
that's not a good look. I don't know if I should say that.
yeah. And it can be seen as a sign of weakness if I open up to you and say, hey man, I'm struggling, or hey man, I'm hurting. Or at least that's
The internal
the
dialogue,
message
yeah.
of the world. That's that internal dialogue, man. It's like I'm weak if I say whatever. And a lot of times we at least have the impression that our family and friends, and especially those closest to us, they don't want to hear we're weak. They want to hear we got it all figured out. But that ain't that way all the time.
No. All right, let's talk about
All
some
right.
shoulds.
Yeah. Your boys are back.
Back in town.
Mad Men of
Fourth
Masculinity,
quarter.
KLDC, fourth quarter time. Today we are talking about pressure. If you're a
Pressure.
man out there, you ever felt pressure?
Pressure.
If you're a man out there, you ever had pressure in your life, man? You ever had times where all the walls were just closing in on you, and times where it just got dark, and you had the weight of the
Sitting
world
alone
on
in
your
my four corner
shoulders.
room staring at candles.
You
You ever had
know,
that day?
you feel like the folks around you are they don't even realize that they're putting their weight on you, but you're not sure if you can carry your own weight. All those kinds of things, man. That's a man experience, man. That's a man living in a masculine world experience, man. And when you are in that situation as a man, you gotta find some positive ways. You gotta find some healthy ways to deal with that. And I got a couple thoughts on that. I'm going to start off first and foremost saying you got to be surrounded by other men. You got to be living in community with other men who are safe for you to open up to, and men who are safe for you to say, yeah, dude, I'm kind of struggling right now. I'm going through this, and this, and what happens 99.9 times out of 10 is you never get judged. You never get judged by those types of men. They are there for you, and they relate to you, and they can hear you, and they're probably thinking, yeah, me too. But you got to be surrounded in connection, in relationship, in life journeys with other men.
Yeah, when you're around the right group of men who are doing their work and they're in community, when you share those things, it doesn't look like weakness, it looks like bravery because we all know how hard it is to share that. And it inspires the rest of us to be like, well, you know what, I'm struggling too. And it's kind of one of those things that's really interesting when you're around good guys doing work because we won't bring it up. We're not, it's not always a woe is me pity party. But when some man says, hey, I'm struggling, then it's an opportunity for all of us to go, well, you know what? I had a hard week. You know what? I just got pulled over and got a ticket. I got to pay this money. My girl's, all over me about this, or my kid's doing that. It gives every one of us an opportunity to let off a little steam. So it's a gift that you give, and it's a gift that keeps on giving because when a man sees you as another safe individual, another safe man who is willing to go be brave and be vulnerable and say, hey, I'm struggling. And now he gets to have that opportunity. Then you truly create a community of healthy masculinity and a community of support. And let's face it, guys, as much as we see it out there and we hear it, there aren't a lot of other places to support us but us. We have families that depend on us and they say they want to hear our struggles. They say they want us to tell them what we're struggling with. But our struggle, our pain, like we talked about before, is a masculine pain, a man's struggle is different than a lady's struggle. And they deal with it in their way. We need to deal with it our way, which means get around other men so we know we're not isolated and we're not alone, and that actually sharing is brave and strong. And then it gives you more tools and it gives you more resilience when the pressures of life come because you don't feel like you're alone. You have an outlet. You can talk to some guys. You have a group of guys around you that can give you feedback. They can tell you about their experience. They can give you advice and say, hey, well, I had this experience, so I did this. It's like I've never gone down the aisle, much less I've gone through the divorce court, but Kirk has, and he can give me all his experience and advice. And if I'm ever in that situation, I know I can count on him to say, hey, this is what I did. Don't do what I did this time. Do what I did that time. And this is the best way to handle it. And, we as men need to support each other. Yeah, we're going to have healthy competition, but that's part of us trying to make each other better. So don't think of that competition as bullying. We just want to see the best of you. And sometimes the best of you is that man saying, hey, I need help.
Nobody has ever gone through boot camp alone.
Uh-uh.
When you go to boot camp, you start off at the MEPS, you end up on the airplane, you end up at the USO at some airport somewhere, and then all y'all get on the bus together, and then all y'all get off the bus together, and when it all hits the fan, you go through it all together. And you ain't never at no point through the boot camp experience, which is nothing but drinking from the fire hose of pressure and stress for however many weeks you're there, but you don't go through it alone. And that's a metaphor for life, man. They say misery loves company. I would say that the company you keep will love you when life is miserable. And you gotta have that group that is with that gets off the bus with you and has to go stand on the footprints or whatever it is to begin that journey of life or to walk through that journey of life when the pressure comes. You gotta have that, man. That is key and important. And so many men, a guy doesn't take. I believe a guy doesn't take himself out when he's living in close fellowship with other men. When he has a close circle of other men that when he has a 2 o'clock man, a two a.m. man in his life, a man that he can call at 2 a.m. and he knows that, and then maybe a couple of 10 p.m. guys and maybe a couple of 4 p.m. guys. When a man is connected, he doesn't do a lot of he doesn't go off and shoots up the place when he feels connected. There's a whole lot of things that connected men don't do. And so we need to find ways to be connected. We also need to have some kind of physical outlet for our pressure in life. You got to hit the gym or the slopes or the golf course is a beautiful place when you have stress in your life, man. When you can get out there and be out in nature and go chase that little stupid ball around. I mean, but you got to have a physical outlet when you have pressure in life, along with connection.
Yeah, the way we should handle pressure, and this is going to be different for every man, but there's some foundational things, is number one, not being reactionary. We as men need to process. We need to think of the bigger picture. We're the leaders. We're the foundation. We're trying to hold this world up. So when we're reactionary, it tends to go negatively. So having a foundation, not taking things personally when things get stressful, when the pressure is on, then you just buckle down because pressure can be exciting. Just like, biochemically, fear and excitement are chemically the same in the body. It just depends on how you think about it. That roller coaster is either terrifying or it's the most exciting thing you've ever done. It just depends on how you think about it. And so if we can pause as men, take a breath and be like, all right, I'm feeling this pressure. What am I going to do with it? Am I going to turn it into something good? Am I going to make a diamond? Or is it going to squash me? And a lot of times all that is your mindset. And mindset is huge, especially for men nowadays. The world seems to be against all of us. It seems to be putting the weight of the world. We got to be all of these things to all these people just to be considered valuable men. Well, I'm here to tell you you're valuable. And what you believe about yourself is more important than what everybody else believes about yourself. So don't allow the pressures of life to cave you in, to isolate you, to pull you away from those outlets. Get some guys around you who experience the same things, who are men who can understand. And that way you can handle those pressures of life better because it's much easier to be able to say, hey, I'm struggling. I feel this pressure. I got this thing going on. I got this new project at work, and have other guys there to help you vent that energy a little bit, help you release some of that pressure, and to be there to support you. So many of us have bought into this whole Rambo, Lone Ranger, got to do it all by myself thing. And like Kirk said, nobody goes through life alone. And if you try, you're going to fail. Maybe you go fast by yourself, but you're going to go farther with others. So make sure you got those guys around you to support you and ask for help. Because if you ask for help, somebody else is going to ask you for help, and then we can help each other make this world a better place.
Navy SEALs don't even go through buds alone. And all of us, every single one of us as men, man, you're gonna feel pressure. It's normal. You're gonna have times in life where you're gonna feel increased pressure, where you're gonna feel the weight of the world is on your shoulders. And whether, again, sports being a great metaphor, where you have certain athletes, the highest performers, the Hall of Famers, are the ones that say, okay, put the team on my back, count on me in this moment. Give me the ball when the clock is running down, and we're down by X amount of points and we need one score. I mean, that's part of the journey. That's part of life. And us as men, we're gonna experience that. And yes, it sucks. It is hard. It is difficult. Life is hard. Life is difficult. Life sucks sometimes. And that's normal. I'm not saying it's okay, but it's normal. And you got to find a way as a man to, like I said, to have the mentality, the up here enough, even if you didn't have the template, even if you weren't given the tools, to be able to say, how can I deal with this in this moment? And to know that I'm not broken. I'm not broken, and I'm not in this alone, that I can reach out to other guys. And if you got nobody else to reach out to, holler at your boys. I mean, that's why we put our freaking websites on the screen. I mean, we are not hard to find at all. Reach out to us, call us, text us. We ain't gonna send you a bill. I mean, that's what we do this for. And so you are not in it alone. If you're a man, let's do this thing together.
Yeah, if it's one thing I wish every man could remind themselves and keep in mind. I mean, I wish we would all get it tattooed on our hand or something, so someplace where we can see. But just remember that this too shall pass. Please stop making permanent decisions on temporary issues. That girl may have broke your heart, but your heart will heal. That job may have fired you, but you can get another job. You may have lost all your money. You can make more money. There's always more, and there's always opportunity in the future, unless you decide to end it and take yourself out. So remember, this too shall pass. No matter how heartbreaking it is, no matter how much pressure you're feeling, no matter how awful you're feeling in the moment, this too shall pass. You can get through it. Just breathe, call on your boys, make sure you got some support, and know that, yeah, it sucks right now. My heart's broken, my head hurts, I feel like the weight of the world on my shoulders, but I know it's going to get better. It's like when you break a bone or you have surgery or you're going through, recovery. It is some of the most painful things you'll ever do, but you know that there's a end time. You know that there's a time that you're going to be back to normal. And that's all we say is, like, as you're dealing with the pressure, know that that pressure is not going to be there forever. It's not going to last forever. You can get through it. And as you get through it, you get stronger. As you get through it, you get more skills, you get more wisdom, more experience. And so just make sure, get some guys around you to help you through that experience, because I'm so sick and tired of seeing all these guys take themselves out when we need them here right now more than ever.
We need you. We need each other. You need us, et cetera, et cetera. The point is, we're not in this by ourselves. Squeeze that thing out, squeeze that thing through. You can push back on the pressure. You can push back on the pressure. Do the best you can. And when you've done the best you can, sometimes you got to sit back and let God and life sort out the rest. And the best you can sometimes is enough. Well, not even sometimes. The best you can is always enough. The best you can do. Like I said, it's that chemical component is cortisol. Cortisol is stored in your muscles. So you squeeze back on that and you squeeze it out in life, and man, we can do this thing together. But the only way we're going to make it sometimes through some of these battles is to lean into one another, and to get help, get a voice, an ear to listen to, whatever. But get whatever you need to make it through the moment, make it through the process, and make it through the pressure.
And we are here for you. We are the Madmen of Masculine. And until next time, we are out.